Betty, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you, Ashley. Always good to be together.
This is a hard job at a really hard time. Why do you want to be California governor now?
Ashley, I have to say, as a native Californian, first generation Californian, and I had a tough upbringing, being a daughter of immigrants, but I see so many families that are struggling right now, and the people who work so hard, and they're people we know. They're the people who are in our classrooms, teaching our kids. There are healthcare workers, our farm workers. I mean, everyone is just really trying to stay afloat right now. And we're a global economy. So there's just such a disconnect in terms of, what are we not doing in terms of living up to our ambition of being a global economy and making the state really work for everyone.
Speaking of the economy and the state working for everyone, I mean, the main job of the California governor is to figure out how to use taxpayer dollars, essentially. And right now, the state is in a situation where our budget and legislative experts have said there will be a need to either cut spending or raise taxes. Which do you see yourself choosing?
I think we have to do both. We have to do both. We have a structural deficit. We've been spending more than what we bring in for quite a few years now. And a lot of it is also, the governor and the legislature deciding that maybe the revenue outlook is a little rosier than what it actually has portended to be. So I think the need is going to be for both. But in terms of cutting spending, I want to just be sure that we are also doing everything to wring out all the inefficiencies in government as well, and there's a lot of it.
Like where?
So I would say in healthcare particularly, we have just so many layers of where we're getting to the point of where we're getting a decision about how we serve people, and so I think that can be streamlined. So I think that would be one aspect, and the other aspect of it is just being sure that what we are doing relative to delivering for the people of California is such that they know how to access services. And so when we're putting up our own barriers to doing that, I think that's also adding costs to how we are delivering services. So I want to definitely look at that. And also looking at how we bring more technology to help our state workers. And look, we have a very committed state workforce. They do their work, but it is also a time where people are demanding more, and rightfully so.
In terms of, just to clarify what you just said, to bring more technology for the workforce, do you mean replacing workers with technology or what?
No. So, for example, we've got these looming healthcare cuts that are coming from the federal government. And I hope that as the state continues to work with counties, even our state workers, I think there's a role for AI in that. For the more routinized work, so that the more intense work can actually get more attention. All of our workers are burdened with just huge caseloads, and so to the extent that a lot of this more routine work can be something that AI can help facilitate, we can free up that time of our workers to do more of the intensive human work. Yeah.
To the original question, you said you do both,
Yes.
including raising taxes.
Yes.
Who would you?
I have to say, what the federal government has done and why we're even in this dilemma as we speak is because to fund the big tax cut that was provided to billionaires and corporations was to cut healthcare. And so we're actually paying multiple times over in terms of we've got to sustain the cuts that are coming to us. We've got the billionaires that are paying less in federal taxes. And so I think that's the first place to go. They're getting the red carpet rolled out for them in Washington, and I think they need to be paying more here in California.
Are you on the side of the United Healthcare Workers Union that has this 5% tax on billionaires?
I am, but I also am very sanguine about how that's going to be implemented because a wealth tax is really hard to implement. From my tax days, how you define wealth can be really difficult. This should be done at the federal level, but I think it is a proposal that has merit, and the implementation will be everything.
Would you support it, though?
I do support it.
Okay.
Yeah.
On that note, California is providing healthcare to undocumented people through its Medi-Cal program.
Yeah.
Is that something you would keep? And if not, would you change? What would you do with that?
I would keep it. And look, here's when I think about healthcare. We're still looking at the impacts of the pandemic that we had, and to the extent that we have any kind of public health emergency, I would want to know that every Californian, has some access to basic health care. I think so. I would make sure that regardless of status, that everyone does have health care. But it is going to be, what's the level of care? I think everyone should have a very basic level of care, just for whether it's preventive care or just the primary care that people need. And our immigrant population and our undocumented immigrants, they pay taxes, they contribute to the economy, they're here, and if we have a public health emergency, all of our communities are affected, so I would want them to have health care.
And I mean, right now the state is paused and is
Yes.
not allowing new adults
Right.
to get covered. Would you change that?
I would rather that we have more universal enrollment and people are in the program, and then we can talk about the level of services that they receive.
But you don't, do you worry about the cost
I do worry about the
associated with
cost,
that?
but the other thing that we haven't talked about actually with respect to the budget, it's not just we're not going to be able to cut our way out of it, and we're not going to be able to tax our way out of it, because we have a structural deficit that is so defined by and at the whim, frankly, of the stock market, right? And so the volatility is real. What I'd like to do, and I hope that one of the things that we're all committed to doing, understanding that the federal government is putting this huge, HR1, massive tax or program cut in front of us, that we can actually build some fiscal and financial resilience against those kinds of things. So I would grow the economy as well. Looking at places where we can have people be in jobs that are more stable, that pay more, that actually can help generate our own revenue, that don't have any play with the federal government. Yes, they'll pay taxes to the federal government, but where we're growing our economy and also generating revenue that way, particularly in high demand areas like healthcare and possibly in some of the technology space as it relates to climate.
How exactly do you grow the economy? I mean, would you be cutting regulations for that sector to help it grow?
I would actually, in healthcare, I would be looking at how do we grow the workforce. So looking at marshaling all of our workforce development programs along with education and seeing where we have, the cost of healthcare is driven up because of access issues. We don't want people resorting to emergency rooms to get their care. And so whether you're in a hard to serve area remotely, or because you're in a rural area, or whether you're trying to serve a population that has a lot of barriers to getting care, this is what we need to really address, because when people have easier access, it really does drive those costs down.
So essentially like universal health care, just how exactly would you implement this? Because the state has had a hard time implementing
it has.
programs.
I would be actually much more granular. I don't think it's a one size fits all. As I've been traveling around the state with this campaign, the needs are so different from region to region. So you go to the Eastern Sierras and, a woman who's pregnant has to drive 4 hours for labor and delivery services. It's just hard to believe. Or you go into, even in the San Francisco Bay Area, black maternal health is still an issue. You need culturally competent care, for that. So I would be much more granular about how we grow the workforce to meet some of the more urgent needs.
About half of the state's budget goes toward education, or at least almost all of it. Almost half of it, I should say.
Yeah.
And just with the statewide teacher strikes we're seeing right now, coupled with these classroom performance issues with students struggling to read, do math and science, the basics of education,
Yes.
How would you manage that? How would you fix that?
We need a major reset in public education. Major reset. We're going to see more strikes. School district budgets are so burdened with a lot of cost drivers, and not anything unlike what we're all facing. When utility costs go up, you can magnify that for a school district. And when our healthcare costs go up, again, magnify it for a school district. So I would look at a couple things. One, the reset has to be, where are we making progress in terms of student performance and closing the achievement gap, and commit to continuing to fund what works, and not just kind of create funding for whatever may work, but we actually have proven examples of how we can sustain student academic performance. Secondly, I would look at what are the cost drivers in school district budgets where the state can maybe be helpful, and I think about healthcare. We're going to have to deal with healthcare. Is there a way to look at how the state might be able to play a role in terms of creating a pool that school districts can be a part of to help bring down some of those costs? But we're going to see more strikes around the state, because these are untenable budgets that districts are having to deal with, and for teachers, my goodness, bless the teachers, they're not paid enough to do what they're responsible for doing, and there are people leaving the profession. I want to be sure that we are still giving them the supports that they need with respect to just safe learning environments, the tools that they need to continue to make progress with respect to student performance. So again, looking at what works, committing to that, but also helping to release some of the cost pressures in school district budgets.
These strikes, though, they're not by coincidence. The California Teachers Association helped organize, all these districts so that these contracts would all line up at the same time to politically pressure a lot of these districts.
Sure.
I mean, is that a power move? Is that sort of an overreach for a union in this state?
You know, I think you may call it a power move, but it's grounded in reality. The fact is that, you know, you look at what school districts are facing, and part of why their budgets are so challenged now is we have declining enrollment. Our student population is decreasing in many parts of the state, and so their funding formula isn't, you know, producing the revenue that they really need to continue to do the work that they need to do. But it's also a bigger issue around the economy, where, you know, where are our teachers and educators going to live, you know, affordable housing, you know, all the things that are attendant to what drives affordability in our lives is certainly affecting, you know, the school environment as well. And so this is it's a power move, but it's a power move based on the reality that, you know, they're not only school districts, but the people who are actually responsible for educating our kids are just feeling a lot of the pressures that everyday Californians are feeling.
Yeah, you mentioned, I mean, teachers struggling to live where they teach.
Right.
I mean, just generally overall for the broader population, how would you lower costs for Californians specifically?
Couple things. I do think that housing is just such a stabilizer, and so I want to be sure that we are doing everything we can to accelerate adding more housing to our housing stock so that hopefully we can just stabilize prices and have people have more access to housing, to affordable housing. I would look at stabilizing rents as well. This is not to put landlords out of business by any means, but when you have churning in a community that then has you know, families having to think about, you know, not being here for the long term, I mean, that's going to affect what schools are going to have to deal with. I would also look at things that are happening in people's lives that are just related to the daily cost of living. Electricity bills going up. You know, looking at my Public Utilities Commission is going to have the full authority to exercise their audit powers to be sure that every rate increase that we're granting our utilities are actually being directed towards making improvements that ultimately will result in more energy choices that will drive down the cost of energy. So looking at
Like
the
what
accountability.
exactly?
So, most of the rate increases are going towards improving the infrastructure to bring on more renewable energy, and I hope that is what it's going towards. But we don't audit whether the rates that are generated are actually going towards that. Did they use all of that, or are we in a position of where we owe ratepayers a refund? We don't know. We don't know. And so those kinds of things to me is just like basic, you know, kind of governing and just looking at, you know, what did we bring in? Did it really fund what we needed to fund? What were the outcomes of what we funded? And so that the next rate increase that comes before the Public Utilities Commission, we have something that we're building on. But I don't know that the public, and I certainly don't understand, you know, why we have these successive rate increases where so much is being shouldered on the part of ratepayers, and yet not a lot to show for it.
I mean, energy prices just generally, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a link between state regulations,
Sure.
directions from the state lawmakers, from the state capitol, constant
Yes.
law changes, increases. I mean, how would you manage that?
Well, let me just say, Ashley, I think the tone of accountability and discipline has to be set from the top. The governor has to set that tone. And we have a lot of challenges here in California. I think the legislature, for example, in housing has set the table to where you can build housing anywhere. They've accepted some requirements with CEQA. They are essentially just setting the table to be sure that we are moving more quickly and with urgency about building new units of housing. Now it's about the financing. You know, how do we get this done? We got to implement and get it done. So my relationship with the legislature will be, okay, we've enacted these bills. Let's now get to work and make sure they're being implemented. And how are we holding ourselves to account in terms of, you know, what's actually being done with this? And if it's not working, then we need to pay attention to that. But I'm not going to be a governor that's going to direct dollars to things that, one, aren't working, and two, certainly aren't meeting the needs of Californians in terms of affordability.
I mean, are you willing to sign like 1,000 new laws a year, as has been the case for the last 2 governors, essentially?
I'm going to sign laws that are actually going to be helpful to Californians. But no, I mean, there's no, first of all, I think that we should prioritize just what it is that we need to deliver for Californians. We have a growing, and my lens is always through the economy, and my public finance background really is informing me that the work that needs to be done now is how are we going to address this growing wealth gap that we have in California, right? And so it's, obviously hitting our black and brown families harder, but it's encroaching upon the middle class. And how do you deal with the wealth gap? You deal with it on the one hand, with just being sure that people have stable, long-term, good-paying jobs, and the ability to earn more if they're not making that much now, or looking at relief on the cost side, and particularly as it relates to healthcare and childcare, would be the two priorities that I would have, so that people can actually get themselves into the workforce and pursue those opportunities for better paying jobs. And so I would look at really everything within that rubric about how we are going to deliver for Californians where they have those opportunities.
There is a national conversation on waste, fraud, abuse, and just government spending overall.
Yes.
How will you protect taxpayer dollars?
I've done it. I did it as state controller. We have independent audit authority as the controller, and what my team and I did, we scrutinized every payment that was requested of every department to be sure that they had authority to pay. We looked at where there was duplication, where there was waste, and over the tenure that I was controller, we were able to uncover about $7.3 billion in just misspending or unauthorized spending, and that has to happen. That's just in the regular course of just doing the work of the controller. But the other thing I would do is I would look at being sure that we are, like I said, just really wringing out the inefficiencies in all of our programs, but also I would look at the role of our contractors, who are our third-party providers as well, to be sure that they are efficient with our dollars. I would look at being sure that we have every authority to look at how we get dollars that are owed to the state of California. I'm going to give you two examples. Within Medi-Cal, we don't have independent audit authority over Medi-Cal. And so some of the what you're hearing from the federal government about fraud in Medi-Cal, our auditor for our Medi-Cal funds, Medicaid funds, is the Department of Healthcare Services. And with all due respect, they're not an audit agency. They deliver services, but under the federal single agency rule, they're the department that gets the dollars. They're responsible for the audit responsibility. And so I think wrestling that back and having it be an independent auditor of the state controller's office, as it had been over a decade ago, we will find fraud, and not necessarily with the people who are getting Medi-Cal services, but providers who are submitting fraudulent claims for payment. So that is one authority I want to get back.
Is that something that you believe is happening? Providers are submitting fraudulent claims?
That was always the finding when we had prior audits, was that providers, yes, definitely. And I think with all this time that's lapsed where we haven't had a robust audit program for Medi-Cal, there's probably much more rampant activity there. So I would start there. The second thing is that Medi-Cal is the provider of last resort. And so if let's say I was in the hospital and my insurance company doesn't pay the claim of my hospitalization, then Medi-Cal would take a look at it to see whether they would pay if I was a Medi-Cal eligible person. And we don't do a lot in terms of recovering that third-party liability on the part of the insurance companies that should have paid that claim. And there are a lot of dollars embedded in that program. We just don't have the workforce, or there's not been the commitment to go after the payment of those claims.
Do you think you would need more auditors?
We would need some. We would need some. But I think once we have an audit presence, I think behavior changes when the unscrupulous actors realize that we're going to be coming after them.
I want to go back to your time as state controller.
Yes.
During the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
You were scrutinized
Yes.
for authorizing and working behind the scenes
Yes.
to quickly approve a controversial mask deal,
Yes.
to, wire nearly $500 million to a company like that.
Mm-hmm.
People were worried that you were supposed to be the gap stop there.
Yes.
Just what did you learn from that situation?
Well, I will say I didn't approve anything. I was in touch with the vendor. This was in the early days of the pandemic. People were looking for masks, PPE. I was in the office every day with a limited team. We were taking calls. State workers were looking for masks. First responders, like nurses, were looking for masks. We had, or essential workers rather, we had just everyone calling, where can we get masks, where can we get masks? I get a call from a vendor who wanted to let me know he had a shipment of masks at the Port of Long Beach. Can somebody come and look at them? I called the governor's office. I let them know. And they never got a call back, and they said, well, that shipment's gone, who else can I talk to? Then he wanted to know about the state procurement process. I don't make procurement decisions. I didn't authorize anything. I referred everything on, but I was also very sanguine about the fact that people were working without protection. And so I shared information with him about how the procurement process works. He said he had been talking to General Service. I said, look, make your best case because they're scrutinizing this, they're going to make the decision. And I did tell him, he asked whether we do prepayments. I said, yes, it's an emergency. We do prepayments. I would have shared the same information with any other vendor. I did not make the decision. I did not scrutinize this vendor. All I did was refer him.
But did you scrutinize the governor's office for moving too slowly on this? I mean, that came out in court documents.
Did I scrutinize?
The governor's office saying that he was moving too slowly.
What I said was there was no response from the governor's office. I don't know exactly what the inner workings were of the governor's office, nor was it my issue. I just wanted to refer it over. But here was my what I learned from it is this: in the early days of the pandemic, the images that were so heart-wrenching were people who had contracted the virus and actually had to be intubated. Had a breathing tube put in them. My mother's been intubated twice for a viral infection unrelated to COVID before the pandemic. I didn't want that for anybody. So what did I learn? I think my emotions got in the way. I also think that, with respect to just these processes that we put up during an emergency, they should be much more transparent and clear for all of us within state government. And because I knew that we had an emergency and a need for PPE, all I knew how to do was just keep referring this person, to the governor's office. And to the extent that they weren't getting a response, I didn't know whether he was an unscrupulous actor or not. He took California for a ride. Luckily, we were able to recover the money that was wired, and shame on him. But had it been somebody who was actually a bona fide, vendor, I mean, we would have been, to the good of that. So a lot of things to be aware of in an emergency situation.
But how do you, let Californians know now that you would never do something like that again?
Well, what I would do is to be sure that we have expectations spelled out up front about how to handle situations like this from the governor's office throughout all of state government. And, we happen to be the office that was in the office. We had people in the office every day. We answered our phones. We were trying to be responsive to the pandemic. And what I would say to viewers is that, look, the buck stops with me. I'm accountable. Did I share that information? Yes. Would I have shared that information with any other vendor who had something to offer to the state of California? Yes. But I did not have procurement decision-making authority. And but I will ask, if this happens again, that we all are on the same page about how these processes work.
Switching gears now to crime. There's a tug of war in the state between, the need to, under a court order, reduce prison populations in the state, but at the same time, have Californians feel like people who commit crimes are being held accountable. How will you manage that situation in this state?
Yeah, it is a balance. And I think, I took a no position on Prop 36 because I thought it really created an expectation with the voters that we would have a solution overnight. There was no funding attached to it. And yet, I also am someone who's been involved with just seeing a lot of programs become successful in terms of, those offenders who are released to be able to get into holistic reentry programs that do enable them to have an economic livelihood. So I would look at definitely more of those types of programs that can be helpful. When we had early releases of our inmates under Prop 47, there was no additional funding for mental health, no additional funding for drug treatment, no additional funding for community supervision. And these are the supports that people need to be able to reintegrate into the community. And to put it all in the counties who are strapped just on the natural was unrealistic. And so this will be a balance. I think for anyone who is committing hard crime, yes, absolutely. We're going to continue to have a consequence with that. For those less serious offenses, I would like to see more community-based alternatives that can actually help them get back into the community and where they are getting all of the support services they need to be successful.
This is also connected. Many have linked this situation to also, homelessness.
Yes.
And how will you make meaningful change there? Make people feel like, the homeless, these encampments are cleared off the street and that people feel like they can walk and enjoy their communities.
Yeah, no, it is a serious issue. Look, this is going to be, homelessness is an issue that involves a lot of different stakeholders. The state, obviously, which has put a lot of funding towards the issue. We have the counties and the cities, obviously, but also our business community and just the community in general. It's a complex issue from the perspective that those who are unhoused for a lot of different reasons. We're going to continue to build housing so that we have housing supply and hopefully affordable housing supply for those who become unhoused because they couldn't pay the rent or couldn't pay a utility bill. And so I would look at being sure that we continue on that sense of urgency about building new housing. But the other thing I would do is also look at how do we better coordinate with our counties and cities about the money that the state does give to them. There was never a conversation about roles and expectations and even how to coordinate. And so the dollars that did go out, sure, there were some successes, but I'd like to actually know that from the perspective of what's working, we continue to fund, and what is challenged, we understand, just what some of the barriers were to success. And that's the kind of accountability that we need to be much more granular about. And as I said, because people are becoming unhoused for so many different reasons, I also would want to look at how do we prevent homelessness in the first place? To just be sure that those who are just going to be meeting right up to that point of where maybe, like I said, they can't pay a utility bill or they can't pay their rent for a month. I'd much rather provide them with some assistance up front rather than getting them into the cycle of being unhoused, where they may or may not get the services and support that they need.
Switching gears again to affordability, I mean, just generally being able to afford life in this state.
Yeah.
Some people point to California's climate goals as a reason why things have gone up. I mean, would you change the attempt to phase out the use of oil and gas by 2045?
I would do this. The climate goals I would keep in place. But what we do need is a roadmap about how we get there. And we look at the world now, and it's actually one of the issues I'm very concerned about, is that the abandonment of just trying to do better with respect to emissions worldwide. We've had major setbacks. And I do believe that this is going to be the existential crisis we're all going to face. But with the goals that we have, out of gas-powered vehicles by 2035, carbon neutrality by 2045, we need to work backwards and have a roadmap about what does that look like along the way. And I do believe that if we were making progress to kind of get there, so to look at bringing all the stakeholders together, they're going to be the most directly affected by it. Getting out about gas-powered cars.
Does that include the oil and gas industry?
It includes oil and gas industry because their industry is going to change radically. But I also don't believe that we can have this transition to clean energy without them. We might need to use their facilities. And there have been oil companies, just in the Bay Area, Phillips 66 has a great renewable energy center where they task their employees to come up with the next generation fuels. And knowing and still operating the refinery, but knowing that there was going to be this transition, they want to get out ahead and just do that development. They took a financial hit for it, but they actually did think that this was where it needed to be developed. And they've done that. They have sustainable fuels that are on the market now. Had we started that from the beginning and just really created this roadmap about how we can even help invest in companies to do that, we might be in a better place today, but we're not. So as governor, what I would do is I would get on the business of creating this roadmap, because this transition is we're going to meet points in time where, yes, the price of gas is going to go up, but do we have enough alternatives for people to rely on that could actually help mitigate that? It's going to affect jobs of people who are working in the oil and gas business. So what's that transition look like in terms of having them move into more of the renewable energy jobs? And then how do we look at the health outcomes that are actually going to be measured as we are making this transition? This is for a benefit of our communities. And so to the extent that we're reducing emissions and we can actually measure what the health outcomes of that are, I mean, that's all about the accountability of how we move forward with this transition.
Switching gears, you running as a Democrat in this race, how will you represent Californians who are not part of your political party?
Oh my goodness, I represent all Californians. I mean, this is, and I have to say, one of the things about campaigning that I truly cherish is just what a wonderful state we live in, including, yes, red and purple parts of the state, which I actually make a concerted effort to go visit because I'm not familiar with those areas. And I will say, Ashley, as a Democratic state, we have ignored those parts of the state for quite a long time. Because when you go to those areas, what I see is that they're innovating every day. They're not getting the dollars from, a Democratic administration from Sacramento or Washington, but they still have to take care of their communities. And so I just am so inspired by what they do. They come together regardless of partisanship to just figure out what they have to do to grow the economy, what they have to do to deal with the homelessness issue, what they have to do to just attract businesses. And so all of this to say that we're not starting from square one here. Certainly I'm not as the next governor. We have so many examples to pull from. And if we think about California as a state where we're made up of unique regions that have particular attributes, we live in a great state, hands down.
Okay. 2 quick final questions for you. The first one being, what grade would you give Governor Gavin Newsom for the last 2 terms as governor?
I would say, before I give the grade, I will give you a grade. Let me just say how much I appreciated him, particularly during the pandemic. To be a governor that was present, may not have agreed with him, but just, obviously in command of the situation and bringing all the resources to bear about how to move California forward. So I really just give him high marks for that. I also want to applaud him for just pushing back really hard against this Trump administration. Anytime our funding, rights and protections are going to be under attack, we have to push back. I would, however, do that on the political side, not on the public side, just so it's clear that what we do on the public side is that we're governing and delivering for Californians. And that's where I think we've kind of lost our way. We haven't been keeping, kind of a steady foot on the pedal related to that. I would give him a B-.
B-, okay. And then if you are elected governor, what are 3 words that you would use to describe California's future under you?
Competent, accountable leadership.
Betty, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ashley.